So welcome, I'm Terry Koenig, and this is Voice of the Customer, or VOC, and Critical to Quality, or CTQ. We'll cover a couple other topics in this PowerPoint as well. Get my face in this lower right corner where I try to keep the words out of the way. All right, so customer-driven organization. We talk about that or Six Sigma. Often you'll find Jack Welch come up from GE, kind of push this pretty far within the States. So it's quote, the best Six Sigma products begin not inside the business but outside it. Focus on answering the question, how can we make the customer more competitive? What's critical to the customer's success? It's knowing what the customer wants, right? So VOC, voice of the customer, is used to describe the customer needs and their perceptions of your product or service. Remember, it's how they view the product. And what's critical to quality? What do they deem important? Sometimes we're wrong on that. So what's critical to quality? So the purpose is customer needs. Figure out what the customers care about. Set priorities and goals that are consistent with customer needs, and determine what customer needs you can profitably meet. So a great example of this is cell phones or smartphones, right? There's this battle between Apple and Android, and what features come and go when they do updates. Samsung adds waterproof and wireless charging. Apple takes away a headphone jack. But at some point they think it's for the better, it's for the needs of their customers. And what products we buy or how we respond to that is kind of whether it's going to keep going or whether you get your headphone jack back or what features come and go on not only phones but on cars and any other items. So how do you find this information? Right, interviews, point of use observations, could be like secret shoppers, focus group surveys. It could be those horrible phone calls we get from, on the do not call list. They call you anyway. So whatever you hear from the customers, it helps develop your critical to quality characteristics. It's verbal or numerical data, specifications identified by the customer. So it could be if it's sizes, if it's tolerances, on how large or small something can be. It could be a visual. It could be how something feels, how something looks, all kinds of critical to quality characteristics. They're not just measurements. If you're used to dealing with blueprints, you might have measurements that are critical to quality and some that are reference. So it's not just a critical to quality dimension, it's a critical to quality characteristic. So a CTQ tree, that's a tool that aids in translating customer language into quantified requirements. So what is a CTQ tree? It translates broad customer requirements into specific critical to quality requirements. And it helps you move from a higher level down to the detailed specifications to ensure that all aspects of their needs are identified. It's a way of kind of mapping out the needs that the customer identified, a way to keep track of it. So it's not really a tree, obviously. Here's a CTQ tree example. So if the customer says they need good customer service, well, what does that entail? You got to break that down. So they want knowledgeable representatives, friendly representatives, and a short wait time. Pretty understandable, right? And if we've ever called anyone, we probably agree that that's good customer service. But what does knowledgeable reps mean? Answers, correct answers. They can answer questions without going further. and so on and so forth as we go down this list. Friendly reps, customer greeted by name, customer not interrupted, short wait time, and then have some specific measurements tied to those. Sample the call monitors, hold time max 30 seconds, transfer wait time less than 1 minute. So yeah, kind of break this down on what the CTQ measurement is for good customer service. Let's go from general to very specific. Then prioritizing your CTQs. So which one do you want to do first? So we did some 410 voting in the first lesson, or we've done it before in another class. So it's a way to kind of take the critical to quality. What are we going to focus on? If we can't add everything the customers want, what do we focus on? What do we prioritize? It's a way to break it down a little bit. So as an assignment, you're going to create a CTQ tree. There's some situations on the next slide, and you're going to assume the role of the provider of the good or service, not the customer, the provider, and use VOC data to construct a CTQ tree. So identify 3 needs, 2 drivers for each need, and 1 CTQ for each driver, and then 1 measure for each CTQ. You should have it kind of broken down. So 3 needs, 2 drivers for each, that equals 6 drivers, which equals 6 CTQs, which equals 6 measures. So what do we got for choices? Purchasing an automobile. So automobile salesman, taking a trip on an airline, resolving a credit card charge that's not yours, probably via phone call, opening and checking or savings account at a bank, building a house using a single contractor. So again, very vast array, and you can choose the one that you identify with the most or that you just want to do. That was assignment 1. All right, so defining a Lean Six Sigma project. So this is getting into developing a project charter. I kind of rolled this all into one PowerPoint, so you can just play the video and pause it as necessary, instead of having to do, like 6 different PowerPoints. All right, so project charter. So once the voice of the customer and the CTQs are identified, a project can be initiated. And you want to have a steering committee and you want to be able to handle a team. Handed to a team. Either way, the team must now define the project in the form of a project charter. So this is just a project charter is just a formal way to document what you're going to do. So you have a document to revert back to in the future. So general project charter components, you're going to have a problem statement. What are you trying to solve? What's the point of your project? Your key stakeholders, that might be the team involved or the customer involved. What's the business impact? What's the goal statement? What's the purpose of it? And how far is the scope on it? If you're looking to do add something for, if it's Toyota and you're looking at cars, is it just the Corolla line, or is it the whole sedan line? Define the scope of the project. What are the bookends? How far are you going with this? And it's a detailed high-level plan. Then list the team members. So this is kind of a format you can use. General layout, project name, date chartered, expected completion date. What's the problem? Measures used to determine success. Responsibilities and boundaries, that's kind of your scope. But this is just a very simple project charter format. I think there's a Word doc in Blackboard with this information in it as well. So a good problem statement. You want a good problem statement to keep the team focused. So it consists of the process or the product you're working on, business measures, performance goals, uh, but you want it to be detailed. So bad problem statement would be something like the paint line keeps making bad parts and is all messed up. Right? That's a bad problem statement. There's nothing specific about it. So you want to speak with a little more data. You know, not just thoughts and feelings and theories and past experiences, but have some detail, some data to speak to. So same paint line. So it might be painting on bracket A126. Auditing shows painting bracket creating 10% defect rate due to light paint. Goal for this line is 1% defect rate overall. You could even go further. I would go further and describe light paint. What's light paint? You know, is there a paint thickness? Is there a way to measure that? So who are your customers? You want to identify your customers, right? That seems like an important idea. So you could have internal customers, people inside the organization that depends on your services or your information, or you can have external customers. That's what we generally think of. Who's using the product or service? So it's not just you have to meet your external customers, you have to meet the internal customers, the people inside your organization that it goes to next, whether it's the next operation or if you're creating a bill of materials, the warehouse expects the bill of materials to be right. So take your time to create a good problem statement and to try to solve these problems. Um, I don't know if these quotes are true. I just like them. So Albert Einstein, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solutions. So think about your problem statement. I always like the Abe Lincoln one, whether he said it or not, I don't care. It's just a great quote. If I had a day to cut down a tree, I'd spend 23 hours sharpening my axe. So take your time. Get the problem statement right. All right, so you want to use a team, you know, cross-functional. You want to use process users, process experts, and some outsiders. You want people who know the process. You want people who know nothing about the process. You want different personalities. If you go back to the disc analysis you did, I know you won't know where people fall, but you could do a small activity like that to make sure the team you selected or people you're looking at don't all have the same team personality. And I always thought, or I was told by a teacher of mine that stuck with me, obviously, that a good group size for just about anything is a 2-pizza team. If you can feed a team with 2 pizzas, that's a good size for a team. So, project charter exercise, assignment 2 for this week. So, here is your problem. Southside Sheboygan McDonald's restaurant has a VOC complaint about its Big Mac sandwiches over the past 3 months. 15 people, which equals 3% of the Big Mac sold, have complained of foreign material in the food. Material did not make them sick, but they were all visually verified by store management as being a single piece of white plastic wrapping paper about ½ inch to 1 inch in size. So use that information to form a team and develop a project charter to address the problem. So it is fictitious, but who's going to be on your team? So if you want to do something different than the Big Mac, I'm open to it. But it's a good way to compare the assignments if you do the same thing. Never mind, scratch that, do the Big Mac thing. If you watch this. And I guess I'll know who watches this. So this is the video watching test. because I think in Blackboard it says you have the option. So when you do your assignment, put it somewhere in there. Okay, so I have a weird sense of humor. You'll figure that out soon enough. Um, in your charter, per video instructions, in your charter or in your problem statement when you put this in there, per video instructions. So I'll know right away anybody who did the assignment without watching the video. Um, it's just kind of a fun experiment. I would like to see who watches this. I sit and create these videos for the students, and I'm always curious who watches them. So here's the charter format again. Feel free to copy, use this. It's a nice layout. And they all kind of look the same. All right, we're going to get into process mapping. All right, you see me keep looking over my shoulder. So again, this is where the video comes in handy. So you may or may not heard that I have a pet sloth, a two-toed sloth named Enzo. And that's where I like to record these videos because it's quiet, it's warm, it's humid because that's what he likes. And usually he sleeps during the day. Right now it's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon and he's usually sound asleep. But I can hear him stirring a little bit. Let's see if we can get him. Oh, there he is. You see him climb? My head's in the way. There he is. I think he's playing with a stuffed animal right now. It's always kind of fun. I think he knows I'm talking about him. Yeah, he's trying to grab that dinosaur. Anyway, that's what I keep looking at. Usually he's not awake. Feel free to email me if you have any sloth questions. I'm always happy to answer those too. All right, process mapping. I'm going to pause this for a second, take care of it. All right, back to process mapping. So why do we map processes? You want to define where your process kind of goes. It's a visual representation of your process in a logical sequence. Identifies where data collection should take place, identify target areas of greatest concern. It's a way to visualize the activities within a process. And then you can always change it around too. You can be like, oh, what if we moved, section ABC over where XYZ is? That's kind of a way to lay things out. I think he's coming out to play. So you want to review the process to be mapped, validate the boundaries, right? These are the steps to it. Identify the type of map you're going to create. Determine the main steps in the process. Arrange the steps in the appropriate order. Discuss the results. Number the process steps for easier reference. And if you do it first on a flip chart or a whiteboard, just transfer it to paper and date the document. So you can kind of keep control of it. He's curious. It's kind of exciting during the day. Doesn't happen often. So some keys to successful process mapping. Make direct observations. They call this a gemba walk. In Japanese, it means the real place. That means go to where processes are really happening. Don't take previous information as matter of fact. Go out and check for yourself. Take the team to where the work is being done. Clarify the purpose of the project. See firsthand what's taking place. And let the team learn the process. While you might have some process experts, hopefully you have some outsiders on your team that can see the process, maybe for the first time. and get some fresh eyes on it. So never rely on documentation. That's your SOPs, your work instructions. No matter how great you think they are, go out and actually watch what's happening. So the process map is an overview of the process. You want to stay at the same level of detail, and you don't want to get super deep. You want to be able to have enough details without it being completely overwhelming. It's a team activity, so make sure you use your entire team. And keep updating your map. It's never done. It's what we call them living documents. They're meant to be updated. So it describes process boundaries, major activities or tasks, the inputs, the outputs, the parameters, customers and suppliers, process owners. He went back to sleep. He's a sloth after all. So the simple input model is supplier, input, process, output, customer. That is referred to as a SIPOC. Supplier, input, process, output, customer. So it's called a SIPOC. You'll create a SIPOC. So what is a SIPOC? My head a little more out of the corner there. It's the defined part of DMAIC. I say it both ways all the time. So on a really high level, so a SIPOC gets more detailed on this, but on a really high level, if you go with the visuals here, if you're building a house, if your process is building a house, your input is lumber, your supplier I have is Drexel Building Supply, your output is a house, and your customer is the home buyer. Now that's a super simple high level, but it's a great way to visualize a SIPOC. It's used widely enough that you can Google SIPOC template and you'll find this one. It's the Microsoft template, which is really good. I love this one. So feel free to use this. So it lists the suppliers, inputs, outputs, and customers in no specific order. And then it kind of pyramids down into the process steps across the bottom. And I really like this layout. I think it's one of the easiest to understand, a good one to create, but you don't have to. Don't let the technology kind of scare you away. You can do it any way you want. This one is in Excel. So it's different suppliers, their inputs, process steps listed there, outputs. Just remember, it doesn't have to be nice and neat if you use Excel. Some people tend to make these really nice, neat rows across, and it's not one supplier, one input, one process step, one output, one customer. It's not that nice and neat. It's going to be a little sloppier than that. That's okay, because we'll get into that. I kind of show you because it's going to kind of go all over the place. So you can do it electronically using Word, PowerPoint, Excel. Do it on a whiteboard, pencil and paper, whatever works for you. Don't let the technology stop you. Some of the whiteboard ones are the best. No room for my face on here. So we're going to go through each one. So suppliers is where it's coming from. So you can have multiple suppliers. Chances are you have multiple suppliers. And it's not just for the hard stuff. It's for the software too, or the support functions. It's the labor. It's the manpower. They can contribute more than one input. So break it down as far as you need. If you want to break it down to nuts and bolts and labor and electricity, that's fine. Reason we identify suppliers is hopefully you can save some money in the future by combining some suppliers or having backup suppliers. And again, we talk about this a lot in almost every aspect, is they can be external or internal. So it might be another department. It might be an outside supplier. It doesn't have to be an outside supplier. And how many suppliers might depend on your product, right? If you're doing a SIPOC for a big pen versus a Toyota Camry or any kind of car or truck. It's going to be vastly different. All right, so the suppliers supply the inputs, the supplies, right? Um, so again, so you might have one supplier or many. So Ford has many suppliers for tires. Tires is the input, and they have a lot of suppliers for tires. Uh, on the other hand, you could have one supplier with many inputs. You know, go to Menards and you pick up everything, right? One supplier. So the inputs are what you need to complete your process. So the tangible, raw materials, land, machine, you know, things you can physically touch and see. But you might have some intangible, labor, manpower, electricity, permits, patents, licensing, a recipe. I always like the recipe example. So if you want to make Coca-Cola, you can have water, corn syrup, whatever else is in there, red dye number 5, um, carbonation. Unless you have the recipe for it, you don't have Coca-Cola. You might have cola, you might have some form of soft drink, but you don't have Coca-Cola. If your process was making a movie and you have music, you can't just have the music. You need the copyright to it. You need the licensing agreement. You know, there's other things you need. So think about those too. Get into some of those details. Those are kind of the fun ones to think of. So the process, this is the do, this is what's being done. So whether it's a product or a service, it has a manageable beginning and end. There's no set number of steps. So whether, like we looked at the Microsoft template, I think there were 6 of them on there. It can be 3, it can be 6, it can be 10. You kind of get to pick your bookends, but make sure they're manageable. You don't want 50, and you probably don't want 2. You can pick, but you want to make it. You want to be able to find the good compromise between great detail and too much detail, and define who's doing those processes. If it's an employee, if it's a machine, where it's being done, if it's a different facility, if it's a different company, put some detail into them. So the outputs, again, internal versus external. What kind of outputs? So it could be the main output, right? You have the house, the car, the intentional output, what you're making. The first thing you identify. That's pretty easy to do. But you want to start thinking of the unintended outputs. It might be the waste oil, some grinding dust. It might be some dissipated heat. If you're baking chocolate chip cookies, right? Your output is a cookie. That's what you're expecting to make. But you put out heat, you put out a dirty pan, a dirty bowl, a dirty spatula, some sticky fingers, dirty spoon, some eggshells. So yeah, those are also outputs of your process. Just because the intentional one was the cookie doesn't mean you didn't create other outputs. So it's and the customers, who's going to use that output? Who's going to eat the cookie? The kids, dogs going to eat the crumbs. Yeah, but who's going to use it? Again, internal versus external. It can be both. It could be a different department. And the customers have clear expectations and requirements. Maybe we can identify some future customers, not just the current ones. So if you go to a car, right, there's different departments. If you're not aware, this is the transmission house. It's the transmission. So you might have a transmission department that made that, which is probably a bunch of processes in itself. Same thing with an engine department. Tons of processes within inside of that. And those are both inputs to the drivetrain or the frame. So now you have the drivetrain and the frame, and maybe the interior are inputs to the final assembly. So those are the customers. You know, what I want from a seat, might be comfort and support. Um, but what final assembly might want from a seat is proper fit, be able to get through the door, easy to install, different requirements, different customers. You got to meet them all. All right, so with my face superimposed over the food. Um, so who's using a SciPoc? Where can you use it? Anywhere. I haven't found something I couldn't quite develop a SciPoc for. Students try to challenge me. Usually we can come up with some pretty good ideas. Sometimes it takes some time. But it can be a bar. It can be how you're serving a drink, how you're making a drink. Definitely how you make beer. How you prepare a meal. Definitely. Right? And then the manufacturing is kind of easy. That's kind of basic. That's what we're talking about the majority of the time. But it could be hotel. If you're hotel management, you have suppliers, you have inputs, you definitely have processes, outputs, and customers. And I wanted to bring this up. Sometimes it's referred to as COPIS, or sometimes they just say do the SIPOC backwards. And that's when the customer has uh, some very specific requirements. So a lot of the times it's for one-off items, high-end items, yachts and planes and custom homes, where there's very specific requirements. It could also be done this way for uh, a new car make and model if something new is coming out. Um, when they made the first Tesla Roadster, it probably went backwards. Right? Start on what you think the customer wants. So this way you can go back and realize what the output is and what the process has to look like to get to that output. And what kind of inputs do you need to get that process? And who you're going to get for suppliers. So it's kind of just working it backwards instead of defining the process in the middle first and then working out to the ends. Go back for a second. All right, so I moved over to Blackboard, quick switch on pause. So here's the assignments for the week. I just want to pause in here because here's the SciPoc assignment. We already talked about the CTQ tree and the project charter. So you're going to create a SciPoc for a process in your home or at work, whatever you want. Nope, wrong one. Where was I? All right, into plant layout. Obviously, we're not talking about plants laid out, but again, I have a horrible sense of humor. So, plant layout, it's where things are, it's where your product flows, how things work, how things move throughout a facility. Um, Ever done these old slide puzzles? Got to move things around to get the picture right. It's kind of what I thought of when I think of plant layout. Move things around to make sure you get it in the right order. So there's a couple of different uh, examples of ways to lay out a facility or a facility way a facility might be laid out already. So there's a functional or a fixed position layout. Operations arranged by function or department, where you might have welding, finishing, shearing, where parts move from department to department. Some of the advantages or disadvantages of that. Obviously, parts have to move a lot, and that's a big waste of time, having parts move or wait between departments. But the advantage is you save some floor space because you can combine efforts. Instead of having, let's say, a welder at every work cell, you can have maybe two of them to cover everything. So you can save some money and some space there. Also, if there's like some physical or environmental um, requirements, say a paint booth, um, it might be hard to have 10 paint booths if you're painting 10 things. Then you have one paint booth because you have to filter the paint, you have to keep it safe. Paint has to all be in, um, fireproof cabinets type things. So it's the functional layout. It's kind of how it might look, right? Sales office. You kind of have to follow this through with the arrows, which gets really confusing. So let's follow the red, right? It goes into the sales office. From sales, it goes down to finished good warehouse. That was pretty simple. Let's follow the purple. Goes in the work in progress storage, which goes to the knitting area, which goes to base assembly, and so on and so forth. Follow these purple arrows, right? It's all bouncing around. Follow the green, it gets a little more convoluted than that. So yeah, this is a function. This doesn't look functional, but at least they can keep it all in certain areas. This is kind of what it looks like. It's all over the place. But a lot of factories are set up like that. So product layout. This is kind of like the assembly line. It moves by a process step. So everything gets done same way every time, and it just moves down in a nice uniform. It's not bouncing around all over. It's just straight line. Product moves through. Process layout might be like a work cell uh, to move like product families. You might have a work cell for um, things that are similar in a different work cell. They might make more than one thing, but they're similar things. So again, the material or the product isn't moving a lot. The people aren't moving a lot, but you might need multiple items because you're going to have multiple work cells. And then a hybrid layout. This one being kind of confusing. So it's pockets of flow. And if you Google this, this comes up. And I really like these descriptions or these layouts to help explain this. Sometimes referred to as virtual cells. So if you follow cell 1, part family J, jobs, uses machine 1, 4, and 8. So we go 1, 4, 8. Now the way it moves. Cell 2 uses machines 2, 5, 7. And cell 3 is machine 3, 6, 9. So the way they're kind of grouped together and the way things flow. It's a little difficult to understand and explain, but there's a way to set things up. I don't know that I've ever truly seen it set up. Most of it's come from books and diagrams. Right, so you have to consider the monuments. So what's a monument? It's something that you think can't be moved. And how to work around them. You have to work around it. And I say think you can't be moved because really I think it comes down to money. Everything can be moved for enough money. Maybe you've seen shows, they're moving houses, they're moving churches, they move highways, they're moving everything. It's the 21st century, and you can move just about anything, just based on how much you want to spend to move it. You might have some pretty large pieces of machinery that look like they can't be moved, but they got there somehow. They didn't grow there. So things can be moved. If you can define a process and say, we can save X amount of dollars if this wasn't in the way, if we could move it, and it costs less than that savings to move it, then move it. So what's a monument and what's not? I don't think there's any true monuments. And even if you say like, well, what if it's like federally protected land? You could look back at Kohler looking to build another golf course and looking to annex some property from a state park. Was the monument in his way? It was. Can it be moved? It sure can. How much money you want to stick into it. So a spaghetti diagram. Sorry for all the food. If you're hungry while watching this, you probably have to stop, get a snack. Easy to create and understand. So it's just kind of keeping track of the movement, the motion, people walking around. You could do it either by drawing it to see where people are moving, or a more high-tech way to do it is you could put Fitbits on them, on your employees or on your process operators, and you could keep track of how many steps. You wouldn't see where they're going. I suppose you could get some GPS ones that could do it for you, but you could keep track of how many steps. You might set a goal then. If the current layout, they're walking 10,000 steps in 8 hours, you might be like, oh, let's break that. Let's see if we can get that down to 5,000 steps. Let's cut their movement in half. I'm sure most operators would be okay with moving half as much and doing the same job. So we're going to watch a video inside of a video. It's like video inception. Now I'll kind of talk during it too, I think, because I want to. I might have to escape for a second to find my volume. Go back to that.
Layout planning. A spaghetti diagram.
All right, here we go. So it's like 4 minutes.
Layout planning.
So they're going to do a spaghetti diagram of making spaghetti.
Sit back and watch this with you.
Layout planning involves decisions about the physical arrangement of economic activity centers within a facility. In our example today, we will focus on all the different movements that we go through to make spaghetti. When we design our plan, we want to keep several factors in mind, such as where we should place our work centers, how often we are going to use each center, and if we can reduce.
Right, that's the goal.
Here are the work centers we currently have. In this example, we will show how layout is important when making spaghetti. We will then analyze the results to figure out where our different work centers should be located. One method of determining if your current layout is effective is by making a spaghetti diagram. Every time a person moves in a plant, a line is made. When all of these lines are combined into one map, it can look like spaghetti because of all the different paths in many different directions. Let's take a look at our current layout. Let's track the movements that I make while I make spaghetti. We'll record them on our map and analyze the results. My first step is to get the pan. Then I need to get water. I empty the water into the pan and it starts to boil. Next I get the noodles and stick them in the pot. Here are the movements that I've gone through so far.
Yeah, that works. Keep track of where he's going.
To stir. Now I need the saucepan. But wait, why is it stored underneath Andy's bed? I don't know. That's the way we've always done it. Looks like this room needs a little 5S in. Now I need to defrost the meat and start to grill. Notice how all of these steps are very spread out in the kitchen. Before I can start frying the meat, I need to make a side trip for some spices. Let's update the map. Notice how much time that trip to Andy's room wasted. A little testing of the noodles never hurt. Now it's back across the kitchen to heat up my sauce. Pour the sauce into the meat, strain my noodles, and get my plate out. Put the noodles on a plate, put some sauce on the noodles, and now it's finally time to enjoy. So is this the most efficient layout? Probably not. Let's see if we can come up with something a little bit more efficient. Final update? Man, look at that mess. So let's do something about it. Let's change the layout. Let's take a look at our new proposed layout. Notice how everything is close together, so transportation time is greatly reduced. In this new design, all of the work centers are located very close. not much movement is needed, and our inventory will be located right next to where it will be consumed. Step 1. Pan, water, and on the burner. Add some noodles. Give it a nice stir. Here's our first set of steps. Look at how short those distances are. Once again, defrost the meat and put it in the pan. Once again, let's do some more quality testing. Notice I don't have to go out of the way to get some seasoning. I eliminate a pan and an entire process by pouring the sauce directly into the pan. Yeah, let's strain it. Whoops, be careful. Get my plate out, put my noodles on it, put some sauce on, and voila, you're done. Here's our final diagram. I think we did a lot better, don't you? We eliminated those long transportation times and put inventory right next to our work centers. If your layout is inefficient, you may have workers making long trips to get common parts for items that they are making. The goal of layout planning is to allow workers and equipment to operate most effectively. Distance equals time, and time equals money. The closer you can have your work centers together, the more efficient your operation can be. So now that you know how to do a spaghetti diagram, you can analyze the flow of the materials and people through your plant to efficiently use space and time.
That's how you make a spaghetti diagram. Kind of hokey, but it makes sense. It's easy to follow, easy to understand. That's part of the process mapping. So here's a before example. So kind of has some what things are and how a process works through a factory. So here's an after effect, and changing it to less than a quarter of it. I don't know what all this means, but it's still moving around quite a bit. All right, that's what I got for this lesson. So duck out of here, go back to Blackboard. So for week 2, here's the PowerPoint. You'll see a video link in there in a minute. So you'll do a critical to quality tree, a project charter exercise, and a SciPoc assignment. 3 items. All right, I hope you enjoyed the video.